My dog is licking my feet, so if you can hear that, I'm really sorry. Okay, so I want to start out with my recent discussion with my doctor. So I mentioned in a recent vlog that I really wanted to get off of the Humira. So I had my bi-yearly checkup with my gastroenterologist, and I brought up the fact that I really, really hated the fact that I was on this medication, this really heavy immunosuppressant. And basically, the way the conversation went was that I mentioned that I hated it, that, I hadn't really been experiencing any really bad side effects. But, this medication, it's relatively new. It still obviously has a patent. Otherwise, we'd be able to get generic adalimumab. But thanks to our wonderful politicians, we can't. I won't get into that. But it's new. And so there's hasn't been a lot of empirical evidence or a lot of, long-term studies because we don't have them. It hasn't been out long enough. So we don't know the cancer implications, things like that. So I mentioned this to my doctor, and basically the back and forth between us was, well, what are your side effects now? And I went through, I get a rash, I get really tired. Sometimes I get bruising that lasts for a month at the site of injection. Other than that, my whole body symptoms is really just this terrible fatigue that is at the same level, sometimes even worse than it was when I wasn't on the medication. So, we talked about this and we talked through it. And, I haven't had any pancreatic symptoms. I haven't had any really horrible complications that have to do directly with the Crohn's. I haven't had any, major hospitalizations or anything like that. Now, I have gotten, really sick a couple of times, but who's to say that I wouldn't have gotten that sick were I not on this medication? And who's to say that I wouldn't have gotten that sick if I weren't on this medication and I just had the Crohn's? Because as we know, Crohn's weakens your immune system. It's an overreaction by your immune system to something that it shouldn't be reacting to. So the rest of your body is sort of unprotected, if you will. Now that is a way simplification, obviously, of the biology of the mechanism of action of what's happening, but that's sort of the way it is. So this conversation with my doctor, we went back and forth, and really, he was convincing me to stay on it, and he did a good job. He convinced me. And as anyone who knows me knows, I am definitely my own advocate when it comes to health and doctors. And I've been through a heap of them. I used to go through doctors like they were going out of style. And I always, traded in for a new one because I was like, someone's got to give me a better experience than this. And I really, really like my current gastroenterologist. He's great. He listens. He takes great notes. There's been several times when I've been in his office for an appointment and I'll say, oh, remember last time when I was having such and such a symptom, or I thought I was going into a major flare? And he'll refer back to those notes and be there present with me. So I feel like I have a good doctor, and I feel like he is doing the best he can for me. So I believe him when he tells me that my best option is to stay on this medication. So as I mentioned, my side effects are very minor. And that is what my doctor has experienced with many of his other patients. He has a great case study in one of his coworkers who has Crohn's disease, who takes Humira. So there are some side effects. The fatigue I mentioned. I get welts where I inject sometimes. It's not every time anymore, but it was at the beginning. Rashes, they get itchy, and sometimes I'll get little spots surrounding the area of injection. Bruising that lasts for a really long time at the site of injection. I'm running out of places on my body to inject it. But that happens with any injectable medication. My aunt, she has MS. She's taken an injectable medication for a decade now. And what happens is you build up scar tissue in those locations. So as anyone who's taken Humira knows, you can inject it in your thighs or you can inject it in your abdomen. Basically the fleshy, fatty parts of your body. Um, and there's only so much surface area, right? There's only so much square footage where you can pick a new site to inject each time. Now, the reason that you don't want to inject in the same place every time isn't because that part of your body is going to build up a tolerance or some weird thing. It's because every time you inject, right, you're causing an injury to that tissue, and you'll build up scar tissue. And anyone who's ever had a buildup of scar tissue knows scar tissue is really fibrous. It's really tough. And so if you're trying to inject into scar tissue, that's also why you're not supposed to inject into like stretch marks and stuff. It's tough. It's tough tissue. So you're trying to put a needle that's meant to go through soft flesh, fresh skin into scar tissue. So that can cause issues. And I know some people, my aunt included, my grandmother is a diabetic, another good example. The needles can actually bend if you put them into really tough fibrous scar tissue. So when you take them out, it's unpleasant. Now, I haven't had that experience, thank God, and I don't think I will for a very long time. I'm not a super skinny person. I've got area to go. But I've got to remember which leg did I do it on. Did I do it in my abdomen last time? Should I switch sides? Just that sort of thing. Basically, you should mix it up as much as you can, but don't worry too much about it. So, side effects for me have been super minimal. Now, there are other things that have happened with me that I could attribute to that, being side effects of the Humira, namely migraines and allergies. So I have developed these crazy, crazy allergies. And if you've watched my vlogs recently, if you've read my blogs recently, you'll know about them. So I've recently developed really terrible hay fever. And for me, because why not, my allergies are super weird. So they've been affecting my ears a lot. Now, I've never really had problems with my ears. When my sister was a kid, she had chronic ear infections. I never had that. I had chronic UTIs and crazy, terrible antibiotic use, which I won't get into here either. But I never had ear problems. The first ear problem I had was in 2009, I think. 2009 to 2010, probably at the worst of my Crohn's symptoms. And I got the flu 3 times that year. And one time I got the swine flu, and it was very typical how ear infections begin. You've got the flu or some terrible respiratory infection. You start to feel better, and then all of a sudden, you're much worse. And I developed an ear infection in my left ear, and I burst my eardrum. Those are the only ear problems I've ever had. And it was a pretty terrible experience, but I got through it. Now, this year, since I've been home from Buffalo, it's been awful. It's been really, really awful, and my ears are getting the worst of it. You know how it is. You get postnasal drip, you get, the sinus, like firm sinus because they're stuffed, and you can even feel it up here. So I've got all of that, and I feel like I have drippage from everywhere, which is gross, I know, but come on, we all experience it. And it's in my ears too. So the way that your body reacts to allergies, right, and I'm going to talk about this in a separate video, so if you're not interested, I'll keep it super brief. Your body reacts to allergies much like autoimmune diseases, and it's just trying to protect itself from this thing it views as a foreign invader. So as we know, pollen is harmless. It's not going to do anything to you. Your intestinal cells, they're harmless. They're not going to do anything to you. But as us with autoimmune diseases or allergies know, our bodies are going to do everything they can to protect us. So one of the ways that your body protects itself is by overproduction of mucus. And that's why some people with Crohn's disease as well end up with mucus in their stool, because their intestines and their immune system are trying to protect them. So one of the mucousy substances, it has nothing to do with mucus, but it's the same sort of protection, is your cerumen or your earwax. And so I've gotten this horrible buildup of earwax just from these allergies. in addition to the mucus or the snot in your nose and the phlegm in your throat and your thickening saliva and watery eyes, all of that is connected. So back on the train of thought, who knows if the Humira has attributed to my body's overreaction of things? It's hard to say. Anyway, so that's something that could be attributed to it. I feel half sick all the time. That could definitely be a Humira thing. That could be a Crohn's thing. Who knows, really? It's probably the fact that my body is constantly fighting these invaders and not doing a super good job, so I stay sick for a really long time, but also not doing a super good job, so I don't feel super sick all the time. So that's it. Other things, let me think. I guess basically that's it. Migraines, allergies, being sick. Yeah, those are my main weird possible Humira side effects. And then, of course, the fatigue and the injection site reactions, that sort of thing. So all in all, I've been really lucky. I've had, moderate to severe Crohn's disease since I was somewhere between 10 and 12 years old, diagnosed about the age of 20 by colonoscopy. I've had numerous MRIs, I've had CTs, I've had a couple of colonoscopies since I was diagnosed. And, it's been up and down. I've had flares. I've had bad days. I've had bad weeks. I've had a couple of bad months. I always around Christmas time, so like December into January, I know I'm going to feel awful. So I just try and be super careful with my supplements and my diet and all of that at that time, which is really hard to do with the holidays. Or I just don't schedule anything, and I just know that that's going to be a bad time for me. It's kind of like that year after year after year. It's always been that way. It's just more pronounced now that the rest of my year, is much more tolerable. And I'm not saying I never have flares. I'm not saying I never have watery stools, diarrhea, constipation, nausea, vomiting, just feeling like utter crap sometimes. And the cramping, I get cramping. I've always had horrible cramping. Like, Crohn's disease is one of the most painful diseases for a reason. But my good days outweigh my bad days, and for me, that's all I'm looking for. Because I can remember back to a time when I didn't want to leave my house. I couldn't leave my house. It was like my life was over, even though I was still alive. And it's not like that anymore. I'm looking forward to new business ventures. I'm getting my master's degree in something I actually wanted in. I'm living all the way across the country from my safe place, and we can argue with the whole mental health issues if this is actually my safe place, but we're not going to go there in this video. This is my Crohn's safe place, and if you have Crohn's, you know what I mean. And for those of you who don't have Crohn's or UC, very similar. If you have psoriatic arthritis, if you have psoriasis, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, if you have alkalizing spondylosis, any of those things. For me, my Crohn's was bad enough that the side effects and the potential long-term ramifications of taking Humira, the benefits outweigh the risks. And that's what it is. If you are on the fence about taking it or any other biologic, Remicade, there's a couple of new ones now, and TVO, I think, is very similar in its mechanism of action. If you're on the fence, do a cost-benefit analysis. Are the benefits going to outweigh the risks? Are the unknowns enough to stop you? Or can you say, I know what other people's experiences have been, and I want to give it a try? And that's all it is. It's giving it a try, because no one can see the future. No one can give you guarantees with your health, with medications, with anything in life. The only guarantee is that someday we're going to die, right? The only truths or whatever. I don't remember what that saying is about death and taxes, but there are risks and there are benefits, and you just have to weigh them. So I was also going to talk about, this is the medication, obviously, but over here. So one of the things you got with Humira is a Sharps container. I forgot what it was called for a second. They send you a Sharps container, and they send you a box to send it back, and they'll send you a new one when it's full, and it's all free to you. So I guess one of the good things about not having a generic, if you have insurance, that is that you get this for free through Humira. So that's really good. It's completely free. All you have to do is sign a paper when you send it back, and they dispose of it for you. And I read somewhere that they were trying to do it environmentally friendly, like recycling the bits that they could, which is great. I mean, I live in Seattle, and despite our pulling out of the Paris Agreement, I want to save the environment. So yeah, you can feel good about your Sharps disposal, which is a weird thing to think about, but when it's part of your daily or weekly or bi-weekly life, it's something to think about. So that, I think, is all I had to say. There was one more thing I was going to touch on in this video, which is insurance. But since we are so up in the air in this country with insurance, it would be really hard for me to talk about it here. I did make a video on my recent experience with, getting prior authorizations and switching insurances and being on Medicaid. And now that I'm 26 and I'm still in school, I made a video about that. So if you're interested, it's some Obamacare, something or other in my recent videos. But I can link it below as well. I will link it below. I'm still trying to get used to this YouTube thing. I think it's been like 6 months now that I've been on YouTube. I say been on YouTube, like I have some great following or something. Like probably about 20 people on average watch my videos on YouTube and some other people on other platforms. But yeah, so it's been a good run. This is my 6-month update, which is actually, I want to say like 6 years and 6 months, something like that. I hope this was helpful. Please like and share if this is a video that helped you make a decision or helped you, you've got a comrade over here that's dealing with it too. Yeah, like, share, and subscribe, and I will see all of you again very soon.